I was standing at the edge of a cliff, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles had turned white. The screen glowed with a cold, sterile light, displaying a clean blue route line. Straight. Precise. The navigation app insisted there was a paved road ahead leading back to the highway. But my headlights revealed nothing but emptiness. A deep, black drop choked with twisted brush stood where, just 10 minutes earlier, I had driven into that damned village. There was no road behind me. It hadn't been blocked. It hadn't washed away. It had simply never existed. People love to say technology saves us. That with GPS, getting lost is impossible. I'm writing this so you understand, sometimes the map does not guide you home. Sometimes it leads you straight into a mouth. And the worst part is when the navigator calmly says, "Turn right," and to your right stands an ancient wall of forest that seems to have stepped closer while you blinked. There is no way back. It began with something trivial, wanting to save 40 minutes. I was driving home from a business trip, exhausted after 2 days of meaningless negotiations and liters of cheap office coffee. The M4 highway was locked in a dead standstill because of an accident somewhere near Voronezh. The red traffic line stretched for miles across the map, pulsing with hopelessness. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, watching the sun sink into the fields, staining the horizon the color of dried blood. That was when the navigator chimed. A pleasant female voice offered an alternative route. A faster route has been found, saving 45 minutes. On the map, a thin gray thread veered off to the right, winding through forest and hills before reconnecting far beyond the traffic jam. I had never taken that road before. But exhaustion dulls self-preservation. I turned the wheel and exited onto gravel. For the first 30 minutes, everything was fine. The gravel crunched under the tires, the suspension absorbed the bumps. The forest was ordinary, birch and pine, washed in the fading gold of sunset. I even opened the window, letting in cool evening air that smelled of dust and grass. But the deeper I drove into the hills, the thicker the twilight became. Not gradually, as it should. It happened in jolts, as if someone were switching off sections of lighting in a massive studio. The trees crept closer to the road. Branches that had once reached upward now arched over the hood, forming a tunnel. My headlights began to feel viscous. They didn't disperse the darkness, they pressed against it. I realized I could no longer see stars between the treetops. There was only dense, impenetrable blackness. The road narrowed. The sporadic patches of asphalt vanished entirely, replaced by compacted earth mixed with clay. The car began to slide slightly. I slowed down, feeling the first sharp prick of unease. In 2 kilometers, continue straight, the navigator said. I glanced at the screen. My cell signal was gone, crossed out. But GPS still functioned. The blue arrow crept confidently across an empty gray field. There were no river names, no secondary roads, just blank digital space. Suddenly, the forest opened. I emerged into a clearing. In the headlights stood a crooked road sign. The paint had peeled long ago, the name was unreadable, just rust stains on metal. Beyond it lay a village. It was wrong. The houses stood too close together, as if huddling for warmth. Dark, with boarded windows, they looked abandoned for half a century. Tall fences of blackened planks. Overgrown yards choked with nettles. No dogs. No street lights. The only thing that contradicted the decay was the road itself. Inside the village, the earth was perfectly level, as if freshly packed. I rolled slowly down the single street. The silence pressed against my ears. I had turned off the radio earlier when it dissolved into static. Now I heard only the tires whispering and the steady hum of the engine. A terrible feeling settled over me. You know that sensation when you enter a room and feel you've interrupted a conversation, though no one is there? That was the village. The air felt charged with expectation. 300 meters later, the street ended in a dead end blocked by a collapsed old barn. You have arrived at your destination, the navigator chirped brightly. I blinked. Destination? I was supposed to pass through. The route ended at the barn. Damn it, I muttered. System glitch. I tried to reload the map. No connection. Fine, I told myself, just to hear a human voice. Turn around and go back. I shifted into reverse. The backup camera showed grainy darkness. It took 3 maneuvers to turn around, fences pressed close. My headlights slid across a nearby window. For a split second, I thought the glass absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. I didn't look closer. I just wanted out. I accelerated toward the way I had come. And slammed the brakes. The car skidded, ABS rattling, the seatbelt biting into my collarbone. I stopped a meter from the edge. There was no road. Where the forest path had been minutes before, there now stood colossal trees, ancient and intertwined so tightly nothing could pass. Roots as thick as thighs burst from the earth, forming barricades. Beyond them yawned a sheer drop into darkness my headlights could not penetrate. My tire tracks ended abruptly before the trees, as if I had materialized there. On the navigator, the blue line continued straight, through trees, through the cliff. Continue straight for 3 kilometers, the mechanical voice said. I killed the engine. Instantly, absolute silence smothered me. No insects. No wind. No distant traffic. I stepped out. The air smelled of stagnant water, rotting leaves, and something sweet, like old funeral flowers. I touched one of the trees. Cold. Damp. Real. I shouted. No echo answered. Back in the car, I locked the doors. Then I saw it in the rearview mirror, light in one of the houses near the dead end. A dim yellow glow, like a kerosene lamp. The navigator chimed again. Route recalculated. The blue line now led to that house. The destination marker sat on its roof. You have arrived, it whispered. Desperation made the choice for me. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped into the night. The air felt thick, like walking underwater. The darkness shifted beyond the beam. The gate to the lit house stood open. Its yard alone was cleared. The door was ajar. Warmth seeped out. Hello? I called. No answer. Inside was clean. A mat on the floor. A jacket on a hook. A blue Columbia windbreaker. Worn at the right elbow. I was wearing the same one. In the lit room, a lamp glowed. A mug steamed beside it. Earl Grey with bergamot. My favorite. Next to the mug lay car keys with a Toyota logo and a fish skeleton keychain. I checked my pocket. My keys were there. I placed them beside the set on the table. Identical. The room resembled mine, but wrong. My sofa stood at an angle against a fireplace I never had. My books lined the shelves, but their titles were gibberish. A framed photo showed me and my ex-wife, without faces. Just smooth skin where features should be. The lamp flickered. The walls shuddered, not like an earthquake, but like a chest inhaling. From the hallway came a wet sound. Bare feet slapping against raw meat. Slap. 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 I glanced at my phone. Route complete. Enjoy your meal. Understanding hit me. This wasn't a house. The village wasn't a village. It was bait. Like an anglerfish's light. It pulled from my memories to make me feel safe. The ceiling lowered. The doorway narrowed, wood bending like muscle. I ran. The opening shrank into a slit. Soft, warm walls pressed against my shoulders as if trying to swallow me. I burst onto the porch and fell into mud. Behind me came a roar, tectonic and inhuman. The house folded in on itself, collapsing into writhing dark matter reaching toward me. I sprinted to the car. Locked. My keys, on the table. No. The ignition. Through the window, I saw them still in place. What had I put on the table? No time. I smashed the window with a rock. Glass exploded inward. I tore my hand on shards, unlocked the door, dove inside, and turned the key. The engine whined but wouldn't catch. Something massive slammed into the windshield. Claws screeched across the roof. The navigator screen burned white. A single black arrow appeared. It pointed toward the cliff. A distorted metallic voice spoke. Only exit. Jump. The rear of the car crushed inward. A stench of rot filled the cabin. Better to crash than let it touch me. I twisted the key once more and floored the accelerator. The engine roared. The car lunged forward. Toward the trees. Toward the drop. I squeezed my eyes shut. There was no impact. Only falling. My stomach rose to my throat. Then light. A blaring horn. I opened my eyes. I was on the highway. Daylight. Traffic all around. The radio playing a pop song. I slammed the brakes. Cars swerved and honked. My passenger seat was covered in broken glass. The driver's window was gone. My left hand bled. The back seat was intact. The navigator displayed the M4. 120 kilometers to home. But in the search history was a point marked only by coordinates. When I tapped it, the map shifted to dense forest. No roads. No villages. Zooming in, I saw a faint gray line that twisted and ended nowhere. A user comment beneath it, posted by an account named only with numbers. They are always hungry. Since then, I drive only by paper maps. Only during the day. I sold that car the next morning. But sometimes at night, when silence wakes me, I smell damp earth and rotting flowers. And I'm afraid to look out the window. Because I'm afraid I won't see my city street. I'm afraid I'll see a single light glowing in the middle of an endless black forest. And my own silhouette in the window, waving me inside for tea. I stood there in complete darkness, lit only by a dim bulb hanging from the ceiling on a naked wire. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold onto my car keys. On the counter, among dusty cans of food that had expired back when a president no one even remembers was still in office, lay a newspaper. The paper was yellowed and brittle, soaked with the smell of dampness. The date printed on it was 10 years old. And on the front page, in grainy black and white, was my face. Not someone who looked like me. My face. The same mole on my neck. The same jacket, the light windbreaker with the distinctive collar that I had bought only a week ago. As I stared at the photograph, feeling my stomach twist into an icy knot, a whisper came from the dark corner of the store, where, I swear, no one had been standing. Dry as the rustle of autumn leaves. Andre. You came back. I don't know how I managed to get out of there. I don't know who those people were, or if they were people at all. But I know one thing. If your GPS suggests taking a shortcut through old country roads, turn around. Turn around even if it means driving an extra 100 kilometers. Because some turns don't lead to another point on the map. They lead somewhere else. Somewhere you don't return from unchanged. Fasten your seatbelts. And pray the engine doesn't stall. It all began with something as ordinary as exhaustion. I had been driving for 12 hours. The Federal Highway M4 had turned into a monotonous gray ribbon, hypnotic and lulling. My eyes kept closing. The gas station coffee had long since gone cold, turning into bitter sludge, and the radio picked up nothing but white noise and fragments of distant religious sermons. The GPS suction cup to the windshield suddenly came to life. A pleasant female voice announced road repairs ahead and offered an alternative route. Time saved, 40 minutes, the screen displayed. I didn't hesitate. 40 minutes meant getting home earlier, taking a shower, collapsing into bed. I turned the wheel to the right, exiting onto a narrow strip of asphalt that wound between black walls of forest. For the first half hour, everything was normal. Then the asphalt gave way to gravel, and the gravel to compacted dirt. The forest retreated, replaced by endless fields. In the headlights, tall dry grass swayed. It looked strange, almost gray instead of yellow. Maybe it was just the way the light distorted it. The first thing that unsettled me was the silence. I pulled over to relieve myself, stepped out of the car, and shut off the engine. Usually, In places like this, far from cities, the night is alive with sound: crickets, cicadas, wind in the leaves, distant barking dogs. But here there was nothing. Absolutely sterile silence. The air was stagnant, heavy. It didn't smell of grass or soil. It smelled stale, like an old library or an attic that hadn't been opened in half a century. I got back into the car, feeling the first sharp prick of unease, and turned the key. The starter coughed, but the engine caught. I drove on, though the sense that something was wrong only intensified. 10 kilometers later, the road led me to a settlement. It wasn't on the map. The GPS showed only a gray void and an arrow crawling across it. The place was strange. Houses stood close to the road, dark, hunched, like old men wrapped in rags. Fences leaned crookedly. Paint peeled from the walls down to gray wood. Not a single window was lit. No street lights. No porch lights. Only the moon pushing through thick clouds and my headlights carving empty eye sockets out of the darkness. At the center of the settlement stood a church. It was disproportionately large for such a small village. A wooden tower with a sharp spire pierced the sky, but there was no cross on top. Instead, a crooked metal rod jutted upward, like a broken finger. That was when my car jerked. Once. Twice. The RPMs dropped. The headlights flickered. The engine died. The car rolled another 50 meters by inertia and stopped directly in front of a building with a sign that read, "Store." The sign was so old the letters were barely legible, the metal eaten through with rust. I sat gripping the steering wheel, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Tick. 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 The only sound in the world. I tried to start the car again. Silence. The battery was alive, but the starter didn't even click. Damn it, I exhaled. My phone displayed, "No service." Of course. I had no choice. Light was glowing inside the store, the only light in the entire village. A sickly yellow glow seeped through the grimy display window. I stepped out. The slam of the car door sounded like a gunshot. The echo rolled down the street and came back amplified. I shivered, though it was summer. The cold here was different, sticky, penetrating under the skin. I pushed the store door. It opened without a sound. No creak of hinges. No bell. Inside, it smelled of dust and rancid oil. The cramped space was cluttered with shelves stacked chaotically, cans without labels, coils of rope, old tools coated in greasy soot. Behind the counter stood a man. Ageless. His face resembled a baked apple, deeply wrinkled, skin gray and earthy. He wore a greasy jacket 3 sizes too big. "Good evening," I said. My voice trembled. My car stalled. "Do you have a phone? I need to call a tow truck." No response. He didn't blink. His eyes were watery blue, almost transparent. And they weren't looking at me, they were looking through me, as if I were made of glass. "Excuse me?" I stepped closer. "I need help. I'll pay." Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. The movement was mechanical, jerky, like a broken doll. His gaze focused on my face. There was no curiosity in it. No irritation. No sympathy. Only emptiness. "Can you hear me?" I felt irritation blending with rising panic. He remained silent. And then I felt it. We weren't alone. I turned around. Behind the dirty storefront glass, outside, people were standing. 3 or 4 of them. Just standing there at the edge of the light spilling from the store. Men and women in dark clothing. Motionless, arms hanging at their sides, staring at me. A chill ran down my spine. This wasn't village curiosity at the sight of a stranger. It was the way a pack of wolves studies a wounded deer. They didn't whisper to each other. They didn't gesture. They were simply there. I turned back to the shopkeeper. "Listen, I just want to leave. How do I get back to the highway? I must have taken a wrong turn." He opened his mouth. I expected a voice, raspy, old. No sound came out. His lips moved, but nothing emerged. As if he were imitating speech without understanding how it worked. And then I heard it. A whisper. Not from him. From the walls. From the cluttered corners. "Andre." I froze. "My name is Andre." I had not introduced myself. "What did you say?" I spun around, scanning the dark corners. Silence. Only the faint hum of the bulb. "Who's there?" The old man smiled. It was the most horrifying smile I have ever seen. It did not reach his eyes. The skin of his cheeks simply stretched, revealing small yellow teeth. I stepped back. My gaze fell on the counter. Among the junk lay a newspaper. Valley Herald, the headline read. Yellowed paper. Frayed edges. October 14, 2014. 10 years ago. But it wasn't the date that made my heart skip. It was the photograph on the front page. A close-up. Grainy black and white. It was me. Not a look-alike. Not someone similar. Me. I recognized the jacket, the same windbreaker I had bought just a week ago before this trip. I recognized the small scar above my eyebrow from when I fell off a bicycle as a child. The headline beneath the photo read, "The guest has arrived. Not missing. Not wanted. The guest has arrived." The ground seemed to fall away beneath me. I grabbed the edge of the counter to stay upright. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "The jacket is a week old." The old man did not answer. He kept smiling. But now his eyes had changed. There was a glint in them. "Hungry." The whisper came again. Louder. Closer. Right by my ear. "We've been waiting for you, Andre." I recoiled, knocking into a rack of cans. I turned toward the door. There were more of them outside now. A dozen, at least. They stood in a semicircle around my car, blocking the way. Pale faces like blank masks in the dark. Panic flooded me, hot and blinding. Logic shut down. Only one instinct remained. Run. I bolted outside. They did not move. As I passed them, I caught their smell. Damp earth. Withered flowers. A cemetery. I jumped into the driver's seat, locked the doors. My hands shook so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. They began to move. Slowly. In unison. One step forward. Then another. They didn't need to run. They knew I had nowhere to go. Start, you bastard, start. I shouted. The starter ground. The engine coughed. And caught. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor. The car lurched forward, barely missing one of the men in front of the bumper. He didn't try to step aside. I heard a dull thud against the hood. I didn't stop. In the rearview mirror, they stood beneath the dim store light. Watching. The road felt endless. Potholes. Dust. It felt like I was driving in circles. Trees along the roadside stretched their branches toward the car like skeletal hands. Then, in the headlights, a sign appeared. End of settlement. But beneath it, nailed to the post, was something else. A wooden board. Roughly painted white. In crooked black letters. Andre. See you soon. I pushed the old sedan to its limit. The dirt road threatened to flip me at every turn. Only when the tires touched asphalt again, when I saw the lights of passing trucks, did I manage to breathe. I stopped at the first large gas station, bright and crowded. I sat in the car for an hour, staring at the neon sign, afraid to step out. When I finally forced myself into the restroom and looked at my reflection, my face was gray. My eyes bloodshot. I looked down to wash my hands. And froze. Something was in my jacket pocket. Something flat and solid that hadn't been there before. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out. A photograph. A Polaroid. It was me. Sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my face twisted in terror. The picture had been taken from the passenger seat. On the back, written in pencil. We are always nearby. I burned the photo in the restroom sink. I sold the car the next day. I moved to another city, to an apartment on the 15th floor, where the noise of the city never stops. But sometimes, at night, when it becomes too quiet outside, I hear the whisper. From the ventilation. From under the door. From the cracks in the floor. Andre. And I know that one day I will take a wrong turn. Even on foot. Even in an elevator. One day the doors will open, and I will see that same dusty sign and the old man with the dead eyes. Because they know my name. And they are patient. Will never forget the moment my headlights caught that sign. It was an ordinary, rusted rectangle of metal on the shoulder of the road, but something about it radiated wrongness. I slammed on the brakes, feeling my tires bite into the gravel, and glanced at the rearview mirror to back up. But the road was gone. Where just a second ago there had been the asphalt I'd been driving on, there was now a wall of ancient pines, so dense that not even a dog could have squeezed between the trunks. I was trapped in a reality that had just rewritten itself. This isn't an urban legend or a movie script. This is what happened to me 2 weeks ago on a stretch between Ohio and West Virginia. The police said I likely fell asleep at the wheel and veered into a ditch, but they can't explain where the paint marks on my car came from, paint that hasn't been manufactured for 50 years, or why my GPS now shows coordinates for a point in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Sometimes, roads lead to places from which there is no return. It all began with fatigue. That heavy, clammy exhaustion that smothers you after 12 hours of non-stop driving. The monotonous hum of the engine, the hypnotic flicker of dashed lines, and the taste of cold, rancid coffee in my mouth. I was driving home to Philadelphia, returning from my grandmother's funeral. It was around 2 in the morning. I-70 was practically deserted, save for the occasional semi-truck thundering past, blinding me with high beams and leaving vortices of dust in its wake. I was running on autopilot. My eyes burned, and my eyelids felt like lead. My only companion was the soft, synthetic female voice of the navigator on my dashboard. The screen glowed with a soothing blue light, tracing the straight line of my route. 4 hours of driving remained. Suddenly, the music in the speakers dipped. A major accident lies ahead, the navigator intoned. The voice sounded normal, yet there was a subtle, almost imperceptible lag, as if the words were being stitched together manually. Delay time, 2 hours. An alternative route has been found. Would you like to recalculate your route? I rubbed the bridge of my nose. Sitting in a traffic jam in the middle of the night was the last thing I wanted. I glanced at the screen. A new blue line veered sharply to the right, cutting a massive arc through a forested area. Time saved, 40 minutes. Yes, I croaked into the empty cabin, tapping accept on the screen. In 200 meters, turn right, the voice responded instantly. The turn was barely visible. No markers, just a narrow slip road onto an unmarked path that immediately plunged into the heart of the forest. As soon as my tires touched that asphalt, the sound changed. The roar of the tires became louder, coarser. The pavement was ancient, crisscrossed with cracks where grass pushed through. I'd been driving for about 20 minutes when a strange sense of dread began to fester in my gut. The forest around me was a monolithic wall. The trees hung over the road, forming a tunnel that devoured my headlights. There were no streetlights here. No reflectors on the posts. Only endless blackness and the narrow sliver of road illuminated by my high beams. My signal dropped almost immediately. The network indicator showed no signal, yet the GPS continued to guide me forward with unwavering confidence. The blue arrow crawled across a gray field on the screen, which showed no rivers, no other roads. Just a void. In 5 kilometers, continue straight, the navigator said. Did I imagine it, or had the intonation changed? Before, the voice was emotionless, standard. Now, there were traces of Impatience? I dismissed it as paranoia and exhaustion. The fog appeared abruptly. Not gradually, as it usually does, but as if someone had dropped a white curtain across the windshield. Visibility vanished. I slowed to 20 miles per hour, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My headlights struck the white mist and scattered, creating a blinding glare. I was alone in a white void. The world had shrunk to the size of my car's cabin. Suddenly, the navigator spoke again, and this time I nearly jerked the wheel in shock. The volume was cranked to maximum, though I hadn't touched it. You are approaching your destination. What destination? I asked aloud, a chill running down my spine. I'm still 300 miles from home. I looked at the phone. The route had vanished. Instead of a map, a single point pulsed on the screen. Right in front of me. You have arrived, the voice stated. It now sounded low, with a metallic rasp. Destination on the right. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the gravel. The asphalt had ended miles ago without me even noticing. Dust and fog slowly settled. I looked to the right. Out of the fog, the outlines of houses emerged. It was a village. But not a derelict farm or a cozy suburb. This place looked as though it had been built from memory by someone who had never actually seen a real house. The windows were too high or too low. The doors looked painted on. The roofs had jarring angles that made my head ache. By the road stood that very sign. A peeling, tilted post with a rectangular sheet of metal. There was no name. Just a series of symbols resembling scratches, /////. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the architecture. There was light in the windows. A dim, sickly, yellow light, like old incandescent bulbs running at half power. And in every window I passed, there were silhouettes. I rolled slowly down the single street. The gravel crunched under the tires with unnatural volume, as if I were breaking dry bones. I tried to make out the figures in the windows. They were motionless. Black contours against the yellow light. Turn around, I whispered to myself. Just turn around and leave. I cranked the wheel left, attempting a 3-point turn on the narrow road. My headlights swept across the facade of the nearest house. On the porch sat a mailbox. It was open, and inside, instead of letters, lay something wet and dark, pulsing in rhythm with my engine. I shifted into reverse. The backup camera flicked on. And then my heart skipped a beat. In the grainy black and white image of the camera, I saw that the road I'd arrived on had vanished. Directly behind the bumper of my car began a thick, impenetrable forest. The trees grew so close together it seemed they had stood there for centuries. No clearing. No gravel. A dead end. I spun around. Through the rear window, I saw the same thing, pine trunks covered in moss, pressing against my trunk. Impossible, I breathed. I just came from there. Route recalculated, the navigator said. The voice was now coming not from the phone speakers, but from the car's audio system, even though Bluetooth was off. Step out of the vehicle. Paralysis seized me. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I locked the doors. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I looked at the houses. The silhouettes in the windows. They had moved closer. They were now pressed against the glass. I could see their faces. They were smooth. They had no eyes, no noses, no mouths. Just pale, taut skin over bone. But I felt them watching. They were looking right at me. The engine coughed and died. The headlights flickered out. The cabin plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the phone screen. "Why have you locked yourself in?" the voice asked from the speakers. It now sounded mocking. "It is safe here. We have been waiting for you, Alex." It called me by my name. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I tried to start the car. The starter clicked, but the engine remained silent. I hammered the start button, but the electronics seemed dead. Only the phone screen stayed lit. Suddenly, the door of the house on the left opened. A sliver of yellow light fell across the gravel. A figure emerged from the doorway. It was a man. Or something trying to appear like one. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, like a common farmer, but his limbs were too long, and his movements were jerky, like a marionette on strings. He took a step toward the car. Then another. His knees bent backward. I realized that if I stayed in this metal box, I would die. Or something worse than death would happen. I needed to run, but where? Behind me was the forest, ahead, the dead end of the village. My only chance was to break through the forest on foot or find cover. My gaze fell on the house to the right. It seemed the most normal of them all. The windows were dark, no silhouettes. The door was slightly ajar. If I could reach it, maybe I'd find a weapon. A phone? A landline? It was a foolish hope, but panic overrides logic. I grabbed the tire iron from under my seat, took a deep breath, and yanked the door handle. As soon as I tumbled out onto the street, silence overwhelmed me. There were no sounds of wind, insects, or birds. An absolute vacuum where the sound of my footsteps on the gravel felt like a rockslide. The entity in the flannel shirt stopped. Its head, devoid of a face, slowly turned toward me. I bolted for the dark house. 10 meters. 5. I flew onto the porch, kicked the door open, and slammed it shut behind me, bracing it with my entire weight. There was no latch. I wedged the handle with an old chair sitting in the hallway. Gasping for breath, I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The beam of light sliced through the stale, dusty air. The interior of the house was bizarre. The furniture was from different eras. A Victorian armchair sat next to a plastic table from the 90s. On the floor lay a rug whose pattern shifted if you looked at it from a different angle. But the most unsettling thing was on the walls. Instead of paintings or wallpaper, the walls were covered in photographs. Hundreds of frames. I stepped closer to one, and the tire iron nearly fell from my hands. The photo was of me. It was a shot taken from the back seat of my car. I could see the back of my head, my hands on the wheel. The photo showed the time on the dashboard, 2:15 a.m. That was an hour ago. I moved to the next frame. Me at a gas station, buying coffee. The shot was taken from the store's ceiling. The next, me sleeping in my bed at home. The shot was taken from inside my closet. They had been watching me all this time. My whole life, every step I'd taken had led to this moment, to this road, to this house. "Do you like the collection?" a voice asked. It didn't come from the phone. It came from the second floor. The creak of floorboards above my head made me freeze. Someone heavy was slowly walking upstairs. Plaster dust fell from the ceiling. "We've been collecting it for a long time, Alex." The voice was raspy, layered, as if 10 people were speaking at once. "But one detail is missing. The finale." The door I had braced with the chair began to be pounded. At first quietly. Knock knock knock. Polite. Then harder. Thud thud thud. The door shook. The chair creaked, its legs sliding across the floor. I backed away into the hallway, into the kitchen. There, on the table, sat a plate of food. It looked fresh. I shone the light, fried chicken, mashed potatoes. But as I looked closer, I nearly gagged. It was plastic. Artfully painted, but plastic. And the steam rising from the food was a hazy mist painted onto the wall behind the table. This whole village was a set. A fly trap. And I was the fly. The knocking at the door stopped. An oppressive silence followed. And then I heard the sound of glass breaking in the next room. They were coming through the windows. I lunged for the back kitchen door. It was boarded up with planks in a cross pattern. I hammered them with the tire iron, splinters flying everywhere. Behind me, I heard shuffling footsteps. They were already in the corridor. "Don't leave, Alex. Dinner is getting cold." I struck the boards with the fury of a cornered animal. One board flew off. A second cracked. I saw the night air through the gap. I squeezed through the hole, tearing my shirt and the skin on my side until it bled, and tumbled out into the backyard. But there was no yard. Just past the threshold, the ground dropped away into a black abyss. I barely managed to stop, balancing on the edge. The house hung in a void. Around it was only a thick, swirling darkness in which floated fragments of other buildings, road signs, and cars. Dozens of cars, drifting in zero gravity. It turned. Through the hole I just smashed in the door, a long, pale hand with extra joints reached out. It groped the air, trying to find me. Route recalculated, shrieked my phone in my pocket. Turn. Down. It looked at my car, left on the street in front of the house. It was the only real object in this madness. Somehow, the street in front of the house still existed, like a narrow bridge over the abyss. I had to get back to the car. I edged around the house along the narrow ledge of the foundation, my back pressed against the wall. The hand from the door continued blindly grabbing at the air. When I made it back to the street, I saw them. Dozens of figures stood in a circle around my car. They were just standing there, staring at the empty interior. They didn't see me in the house's shadow. I gripped the tire iron. It was a desperate sprint. I screamed, wildly and senselessly, and lunged for the driver's door. The figures turned their faceless heads in unison, like a flock of birds. I swung and hit the nearest one where its face should have been. The sound was like hitting a wet sack of sand. The creature folded in half without a sound. I yanked the car door open. It gave way. I dove inside, locking the doors. Immediately, palms plastered against the glass. Pale, long fingers tapped on the window. Tap tap tap. I jammed the start button. Asterisk click click click, asterisk, come on. I roared, slamming the steering wheel. Asterisk vroom. Asterisk. The engine roared to life. I didn't bother with the lights. I floored the gas. The car leapt forward, striking one of the figures. I felt the impact, but the body under the wheels didn't crunch, it burst like a water balloon. I was driving blind. Ahead was only fog and darkness. I didn't know where I was going. I just wanted to be as far as possible from that place. The navigator was silent. The screen was black. Suddenly, in the glow of the dashboard, I saw the fog starting to thin. But not vanish, it was changing color. It was turning red. I looked at the speedometer. The needle was pinned at 100 miles per hour. Ahead, out of the darkness, an obstacle emerged. A concrete block. A dead end. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The car went into a skid. The world spun like a top. The screech of metal, the shatter of glass, an impact. And then silence. I woke up to a tapping on the window. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? I opened my eyes. A bright flashlight beam hit my face. I squinted, tasting blood in my mouth. I was sitting in my car. It was in a ditch. The windshield was a web of cracks. Outside stood a police officer. A real officer. I could see the pores on his face, the stubble, the concern in his eyes. Behind him, the red and blue lights of a cruiser flashed. Thank God, the officer sighed when I opened the door. We thought you were a goner. The car is totaled. You hit an old guardrail at mile 85. I climbed out, my legs trembling. I looked around. I was on I-70. A normal, boring highway. Cars were passing by. The asphalt was smooth. The forest on the shoulders was just a forest. What time is it? I asked hoarsely. Almost 6 in the morning, sir. You've been here quite a while before the truckers spotted you. I looked at my car. The front bumper was crumpled. But on the hood were marks. Deep indentations, like palm prints. Palms that were far too long. And a strange, gray slime that was already starting to evaporate in the morning sun. The officer followed my gaze. Strange, he said, frowning. Looks like some kind of resin. By the way, sir, your phone. We found it in the back seat. He handed me my smartphone. The screen was shattered, but it still worked. I took it with a trembling hand. The navigator app was open. The map showed my current location on the highway. But in the search history, there was one final entry. Coordinates. I didn't open them then. I only did it yesterday, after being discharged from the hospital. I typed those numbers into Google Earth. The service returned an error, data unavailable. But when I switched to satellite mode, I saw it. In the middle of an endless forest, 100 miles from any road, was a blurred patch. The pixels there were distorted, as if someone had intentionally smudged the image. But if you look closely, you can make out shapes. Rectangles. A dozen rectangles standing in a circle. And a small blue dot which, according to my account data, is located there right now. I don't drive by GPS anymore. I bought paper maps. And if I see fog on the road, I pull over and wait for morning. Because I know, sometimes a turn that isn't on the map doesn't lead to a detour. It leads home. But not to your home. To theirs. And they are still waiting.